So yes, I have a new job as developer relations, which is great. I get to come do this kind of stuff, and I run the tech blog at AmericanExpress.io. We're also hosting React Rally in Salt Lake. I announced it yesterday, which is awesome. It's kind of our coming out party for American Express technology. So if you haven't bought tickets yet, you can't. They're sold out. But I'll be there. Here's the, again, AmericanExpress.io. This is what the article is based off of. And there are plenty of other cool things out there, including open source. So check it out if you would. Yeah, we're a really, really old company, and people don't think of us as tech. We're, I think, a 2,000-year-old company. Fun fact, Jesus had the first MX card. Right? It's an old company. I always like to start with this disclaimer that I may not know what I'm talking about, right? So whenever you see something up there and you're like, God, does this guy know what he's talking about? The answer is no. He does not know what he's talking about. So what is clean code? Clean code is a consistent style of programming that makes your code easier to write, read, and maintain. We all understand writing code because we're developers. But the reading part and the maintaining part, a lot of people forget about. Computers are really good at reading your code. They do it all the time. People, on the other hand, have a problem reading your code. You have a problem reading your code, 2 months later. You're like, what was I doing there? Which is the maintainability part. So when you write code, if you write it so that you can read it later, you're better off. In other words, write code that you would be proud to bring home and show your mother. We all remember our finger paintings when we were in second grade. Your mom would put it up on the fridge and your face would just light up, right? That's what you should think about when you're writing your code. Be proud to show that code off. You're going to have to show that code off. There's code reviews. People are going to be looking at your code. So if you're not going to do it for you in the future, you're not going to do it for your teammates, do it for yourself, right? Clean code passes the smell test. So what is the smell test, right? If it doesn't feel right, if you're writing code and it's just not coming together, you're not having a good day, it's probably not right. There's something you're doing with your code that there might be a better way, right? Because if it's well thought out and you're writing the right piece of code, it just comes together, right? You've felt it before. You felt that when you wrote that module or you wrote that function or something, and you're like, I wouldn't change a line of this, right? That's what clean code's all about. So yeah, if you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, just take a break. Take a drink of water. Or two. Go out for a walk. Take a nap. Go to lunch. Do something, right? We've all had this happen to us before. We're working on a problem. We're working on it. We'll work on it for 2 hours. We give up and we go home. And then, you'll be in the middle of dinner. You'll be in the middle of watching, I don't know, what do people watch nowadays? I don't know. And it comes to you, right? And you're like, oh my God, I've got it. It comes to you in the back of your head. That little person in the back of your head keeps working on the problem. And if you keep thinking about the problem, think of it like this. And I didn't have this on the slide, but a friend of mine gave me this analogy. It's the little man theory, right? There's a desk somewhere, and there's information. And you come up and you ask this little guy behind the counter, here's what I want to solve, right? And he's like, okay, let me go get the answer for you. And he runs off, and he runs into the back room, and you go, wait. And he has to run back, and you're like, here's what I want to solve. And he's like, okay, let me go get that for you. And then he runs off, and if you ask him, he has to keep coming back. Let him go. Let him go get it. He'll figure it out. He'll come back, right? Clean code is dry, unlike this guy, who's gorgeous. Clean code is an acronym that stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. And that's a really bad joke. But I also love these little pop-up things I have in the corner. Who remembers like VH1 pop-up videos like from the 90s, right? I was actually going to redo this whole deck using actual bloop, bloop, kind of pop-up video things, but I ran out of time, so you're welcome. So if you see patterns in your code, that indicates that your code needs to be dried or is primed for drying, right? And the way I like to tell people is just stand back from your screen or make the font smaller and look for patterns. Don't read the code, read the patterns, right? And you'll see things like, indenting patterns that go like this and go like this and go like this. And you'll be like, why am I duplicating that? And you probably wrote one of them and then copied and pasted it and then changed the parts that you needed to change. And then copied and pasted that again and then changed the parts, right? That's where you should maybe have some cleanup. Be warned, it's possible to go too far when drying up your code because you're actually turning it into code that isn't clean anymore. If it's so dry, it becomes not maintainable, right? So balance dry code with maintainable code. So it's live coding time. So, the way my day's going, let's see what happens when I click this. It works. Okay, let's write some wet code. This is Code Sandbox, by the way. Does everybody, show of hands, who uses Code Sandbox? Everybody should have their hand up. Code Sandbox is awesome. It's an online IDE written by Ives. I don't remember his last name. He's an awesome guy. But let's write some code. So here's our app. And obviously I'm writing this in React. Odor class. Yeah, don't name it that. And because it's really bad, we're going to have a inner class. And then another, I'll spell out right someday, another inner class. And then inside of that, we're going to have, let's put some emojis. Puppies are cute. Okay? And because I copy and paste a lot, we're going to do that. And pandas. Pandas are also cute. That wasn't me. And penguins. Penguins are really cute. Who knows about the Control Command space to bring up the emoji keyboard? Awesome. Okay, so here's our code, right? You saw all the copy and pasting that I did. Let's see if we can look at those patterns, right? Zoop, zoop, zoop. Terrible. So let's do this. Write a component. So when I get this wrong, you scream out what I got right, okay? we're going to have emoji and name. Sure. And we're going to cut and paste, but we're only going to do this once. Okay, and then down here, we can just do this. What is this? Oh, it's a puppy. Okay, so we've got our puppy. Let's get rid of all this code. Panda. Penguin. Okay, so this is the same. Everything is the same. But let's step back and look at our code. Here's our big zoop, right? But it only happens once. Now, not only is this dry code, but if we ever decided that having an outer class, an inner class, and then another inner class was a stupid idea, we change it once, right? We don't change it here and then find the other place and then find the other place and then find the other place and oh, we missed a spot, right? So that's what that's all about. Okay, on to naming things. So someone said, and I should have written this person's name down, there are only two hard problems in computer science. What are they? Caching, naming things, and off by one. So what's wrong with this store, this storefront here, right? They named it $1.99 cleaners, right? What happens when inflation happens? What happens when it's now $2.99? They have to change their business cards. They have to change their stationery, their pens, their phone book entry. They almost got it right. They have discount cleaners, right? But I'm sure their store is actually named $1.99cleaners, .com or something. So naming things. Use meaningful variable names. And in this case, you pick your own standard, right? But you could go with Booleans, have to start with is, has, things like that. Use meaningful function names. This is where you describe what a function does and not how it does it. In other words, do not expose the implementation details of your function in the name. Keep that internal, because what happens when you change the way the function does something, now it's named something that is not true, right? So, fun fact, Motel 6 was named Motel 6 because at one time it was $6, right? Seems pretty okay nowadays because no one actually probably knows that, and it's just a number, and it seems cool, and it doesn't have a $sign on the logo anymore. But imagine, I don't know, what is it, 1972? I don't know when Motel 6 was around. Imagine the day that they changed it to $8 or $7, right? Imagine how stupid they felt when the person came in and slapped down $6. Naming things, okay? Clean code is self-commenting. Do we really need lemon on a lemon? Right? to distinguish it from the tomato. She likes that one. I like her. By not using comments, you reduce visual clutter. I wrote an entire article on visual clutter out on Medium. But if you're trying to wrap your head around something, and as programmers, that's what we do. We try to wrap our head around something. The fewer things that distract you, the fewer things that you have to focus on, the easier it is for your mind to focus on them, right? I talk about, like, there's so much visual clutter. I actually had a picture of Times Square in my article. It's like, you know what I mean by visual clutter when you walk into Times Square. Even like T-shirts now. I'm wearing gray, right? No visual clutter here. But I mean, some T-shirts are just everywhere, right? The fewer things that you have to look at, the easier it is to understand the things you are looking at. Also, if you comment your code, what happens when you change your code? If you wrote a function that says, a function called add, and then you commented it adds two numbers together. What if you changed your code to do something else? Now I'm going to call it subtract, right? So you change it to subtract, and then it subtracts. But did you change the comment? Maybe. Probably not, right? Because it just hangs off to the right. And unfortunately, computers don't compile your comments. They compile your code. But the people will read your comments. And you just trick them, and you just cause them an hour's worth of extra work, or days sometimes, right? So if you use logical variable names, logical function names, you don't have to comment what that function does, the intention of the function. You already commented it by being. And there are exceptions, right? But if you absolutely need to comment your code, like if it's something that could be confusing or just needs a little extra help, comment your intention and not your implementation. The code is the implementation, but what is this function trying to do? Don't say how it's doing it, but what's the reason for this function? Clean code follows proven design patterns and best practices. I'm not going to get into all the design patterns and practices out there because there's just way too many, and I don't know all of them. But coding has been around for a while, and very smart people have been doing it before you or I started coding. So there are best practices out there. Let these guys make the mistakes for you, and you can just follow in their footsteps. I like the single responsibility principle. It's like if there's one that I put on a slide, and I did only put one on a slide, it would be this one. Use small functions, each with a single responsibility. So instead of having a function that's this big and takes 20 parameters and does so much stuff that it'd make your head spin, break it up into smaller functions. Each one of these things, 3-4 lines long. And then you have an excellent hunk of building blocks to build that same complex God function with smaller functions. Because you can wrap your head around each one of those small functions, and you can test each one of those smaller functions. And then once you've written it, and you've tested it, and you've bulletproofed it, you're never going to have to touch it again. You might touch that function that calls these other functions, change the procedure, change the order, change whatever it does, change the inputs. But that function, if you write add and it takes two variables, and returns the sum of those, you're never going to touch that again. So for testability reasons, it's just the way to go. Leaky abstractions. So don't impose your internal requirements on the consumers of your code, right? If you have to go off and do something to a REST server or something like that, and like JavaScript, we use camel case generally, right? Or if you decide we want to use camel case, but you hit some backend server to get some REST data, and it comes back under snake cased. Why would you expose that snake case data to your outside world? Right? Your outside world meaning your consumer, right? Fix it up for them. Actually make it snake case. I mean, that's just an example, but that's an example of a leaky abstraction. It's imposing undue rules upon the people calling you. Or if something has to go on a URL, and you're saying, well, your username can't have an ampersand in it, because I'm going to place it on a URL. That shouldn't be a concern of your user. It shouldn't be a concern of the person calling it. So clean code doesn't necessarily take longer to write. It does at the beginning, right? Initially, you're going to have to slow down in order to speed up. That means taking a little longer, thinking about it a little more, writing it in a way that initially for you is foreign. I just want to write this function, and I know it's 150 lines long, but I want to write it, right? It takes longer to mentally break it out, at least in the beginning. But if you do it right the first time, you're not going to touch it again, right? So when you have a code review, you don't have to spend time getting, hey, could you clean this up? Or this could be done, it would be clearer if you did it this way. Then you have to, wait for the person to review it, then you have to, make the change, then you push the commit, push new commits, and then you have to wait for them to review it. You write it right the first time, and you're going to make it, you're going to make it into your develop branch a lot faster. So all that rewrite, I think, outweighs the fact that if you wrote it right the first time, and it takes longer, it outperforms that. So yeah, I kind of already talked about this one. Never touch it again. Write it and forget it is what I like to say. So what are some practical examples of everything we've talked about? I'm going to show you some code samples. A lot of these were in the wild that I actually found, not at American Express, but and then we'll show you like a cleaner version. So can anybody find anything that just sets them the wrong way with this piece of code? I mean, except for the fact that you don't have to, there's nothing as children on that span, and it could have been self-closing, but that's no big deal. So you pass into this icon class or component. The class name is optional. So we check to see if the icon, if class name is defined, and if it's not, that double OR bar there defaults it to icon large. Cool. So if you don't pass a class name, you get icon large. I've written code like this before in the past too. It's just kind of how you do it. With ES6, this is really cool. Now you can say class name equals large icon. And if you didn't pass a class name, it's now set to large icon. Because we did that, we didn't have this intermittent variable here called additional classes. We could also use ES6's single statement fat arrow function, and notice the return statement is missing. You don't need to, you just return a value. It kind of gets back to visual clutter. I mean, some people prefer seeing a return statement, but once you get into understanding ES6 single statement functions, this is not foreign to anybody. Once you've seen it 10 or 20 times, this is common. This is no big deal. This is a very small stateless functional component. So this is a cleaner version. I should have put cleaner question mark, right? The difference here is when you're using React, React already has has something called default props. You've used them all the time. But instead of defaulting the class name in line, you put that somewhere else. And that somewhere else could be, at the bottom of the file. You could actually put it in a separate file and import it. I wouldn't do that. But it's not in the icon, right? You can kind of ignore that stuff down below. So when you're looking at the icon function, the icon component, you don't have to see that equals whatever right in line. Just forget about it. Understand that it's defaulted somewhere, but it's not in line. And like I said, cleaner, maybe, maybe not. I could be wrong. This is a good one. Separate the stateful aspects from rendering. So when you write a component, generally you have some state, maybe, and then you have your render. Here we have, when the component mounts, we go out and fetch something. So beforehand, we have a loading spinner. And until it's loaded, we'll show loading. And once it's loaded, cool, we set state. And then we display the person's first name, last name, right? If we use this, which is called a container and presentational component, we move all of our rendering into another module. We called it rendered user here. Who cares what renders, right? When your mind gets around what renders, you can worry about that then. But now you can just wrap your head around state and what happens with state and what am I fetching and what am I doing with the data. And then once you have a user record, wrap your head around that. Open the other file and look at that. But once that's done, never touch it again. Or once this is done, never touch it again. It kind of it reduces your visual clutter. So SFCs, we talked about those already. But I mean, take a look at this. This is perfectly acceptable, but it's extending a component. It's got a render function, and you have to use this.props, right? Here's the same thing, only it's in an SFC. Again, look at how much smaller that is. It does the same thing, so why not use it? Visual clutter. Rest and spread. I love rest and spread. I can't believe we had to do this back in the day. We're using object assign to grab the props. We're deleting class name because we don't want to pass it along to my other component. This is a ridiculous piece of code. But look at rest and spread. When this comes along, it's so much cleaner. And I won't explain rest and spread if you don't know it, but if you don't, learn it, and you will love yourself. Destructuring is also awesome. This is a piece of code that, like I said, I found this in the wild. It's no big deal. It looks good, right? But if you destructure in line, look at what it comes down to. It's using the fact that you can use shorthand notation with ES6 when you're setting an object literal. So inside of our set state where we say active, you don't have to say active : active. You just say active. It'll set a key called active to the variable called active. Right? Yeah, ES6 it's great syntactic sugar over ES3 or 5. Array destructuring. This is my favorite. This is how we used to do things. So if you have like en-us, which is your language and your country code. At American Express, we do this all the time. We're an international company. We have international code bases. So we need to know what language you speak and what country you're from, right? So we split it at the dash and grab the language and grab the country. You have that bracket 0 and bracket 1, right? Check out what you can do when you destructure an array. It's awesome. This is my favorite. I was going to have another. How much time do we have? I'll do it quickly. Okay. this is going to be bonus array destructuring. Can we see that? Can everybody see that? Okay. Let's write a reverse function. And text equals it's quiet. I should sing or something when I do this. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're going to take our text. We're going to split it. We're going to reverse it. And we're going to join it. Ah, good, it worked. Cool, right? Hello World is now reversed. But we're cool, and we like emojis. So, hello world. Ta-da! What? What happened, right? Emojis are funny, and they're weird, and they're goofy. That's actually it's a multi-byte emoji. And splits on it's a multi-character emoji, and split will simply split on the characters themselves. So, if we do that, using rest and spread, it works, which is really cool. That's also one of my favorites. So that's it. So thank you very much. But while we were talking, some reviews have come in of this talk. And I think they're mostly good, right? So thank you very much. Again, Donavon West. Check out AmericanExpress.io. We're going to be everywhere. And yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter @Donavon or Medium @Donavon or really anywhere Donavon, or Donavon.com.
So we have some time from Q&A, and I'll take the moment to tell everybody that I have a Delta Amex card. Okay, so any questions? Okay, I'm going to run and get you the mic.
So can you actually go through the rest and spread with the emoji? Because I did not understand what happened there at all.
Yes.
Thank you.
This character right here, which looks like a single character, is actually 2 bytes long. It's and the 2 bytes have to be sitting next to each other, right? So when you do this, it's not a globe anymore. That's what's happening. Now, I did this and I picked the globe emoji because that works. This code will fail if I do something else. Let me pick. Can I pick?
I think anything with a dark skin.
Yep, trying to find one. Code fails, right? Emojis are weird. That is the skin tone. I think it's afterward, right? It's a modifier for the thing in front of it. So spread doesn't work in this case. It did pick each character correctly, but for multi-character emojis, it doesn't work. When I was writing this slide last night, I was thinking about not telling you about this. And then I was also thinking, hey, I'm going to go write an NPM package that'll do this. So.
We have time for another question. Yeah, okay, I'm coming to you. I keep jumping in front of the camera. Sorry about that.
What's your opinion on using JavaScript features such as like double equals or pluses to change things to integers as in terms of clean code?
Yeah. I rarely use a double equals, like always triple equals. And I know there are cases where you can use a double equal on purpose to do certain things. I don't think that anybody should remember why. I think you should always use triple equal and then figure out, oh, that's that one case where I'm supposed to use double equals. I find that if you use triple equals, you're just not going to get into problems. And then you'll figure out that 1 in a million chance that where you need a double equals. As far as plus plus is concerned, I don't know. I go back and forth. I find myself using it sometimes.
Hey, what are the scenarios when arrow functions are not best practice?
Yeah, I probably overuse them. I use them a lot. It all has to do with scope. This, right? They're also always not named, right? They're always anonymous. So if you won't find the name of the function somewhere. There's a lot of people that always use function versus arrow functions. I like to use the smaller, visual clutter.
Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, do you think there's a balance between visual clutter and cognitive load? Like you can make something super complex and be in one line, but you have a lot more parsing to do mentally. Whereas if you spread it down, you can logically read the steps of what's going on.
Yeah, that was more of a statement, right? No, there's a balance with anything you do, right? I took away the return statement. I took away the keyword function. I took away all this kind of stuff. When you're using a single statement fat arrow function, if you're coming from ES5 world, it's really alien to you, and it takes you a while. But once you get used to it, it's nice to not see that extra stuff. And yes, you don't want to make a single line app, that your minifier would make, right? Because you're never going to be able to figure that out. But you want to break it down.
So in a perfect world, are there comments on code bases, or when is a perfect time to comment?
I probably maybe have one file that has a comment in it, and that I've written in the last 6 months. I don't think you need comments.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, okay.
So when it comes to best practices, it seems like a lot of it comes down to opinion, and
yes.
I hear a lot of contradicting advice. So is there like a central authority in terms of like what best practices are?
You are your own central authority. I would read a lot. I would follow people that you respect, and then I would, throw out the things that, as you're reading this person that you respect, throw out the things that don't make sense to you. The things that you just, you'll be reading something and you'll be like, oh, I get that. Yeah, I love that. Or you'll read something like, I don't know what he's talking about, or I don't know what she's talking about. Pass that one up, right? Don't worry about that one.
So I guess more generally, you could just say just do it the same way every time.
Consistency. Oh yeah. Oh my God. I don't have it in this deck, but I think I talk about. I like to have really strict linting rules, and enforce them across your team, because then your code and my code look the same. I don't want to pick up, your code. I want to pick out somebody's code out of a repo and go, oh, Dave wrote that. I can tell because he always does this, right? Your code and my code should look identical. I should be able to look at it, 6 months from now, and even if I wrote it, not realize I wrote it because it's the same code that everybody else wrote. Consistency.
I had a question actually specifically about linters.
Yeah.
I'm sort of new as a developer, and I come across some advice from a couple of different sources to not use a linter for the purposes of sort of internalizing the rules that the linter would impose. And that sounds
using
like
prettier instead?
Well, not that either, I guess. And then if you do use a linter, run it from the command line before you commit, as opposed to having it sort of constantly running as an extension. Does that sound like good advice or otherwise?
I like to see little curly brackets in my editor and not even get to that point. I suppose that's up to you, right? But I like to kick out PRs because the CI system found lint errors, right? Some people put it in their pre-commits so that you can't even commit code. It saves you a round trip, right? And then depending on your rules, some people just put a commit on top of it with the change. I don't like committing code and then changing it and then later commit. I like to only commit code that deserves to be there. So I'd rather not have it hit the Git repo.
I like the squiggly brace too. So anyways, I have to close questions. Thanks again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.